Good morning, everybody, or good evening. It's Dad Talk today. This is the show that we've been trying to do for a while. It looks like we're finally going to get to make it happen tonight.
Yay.
We got Mr. Paul Elam back on the show. Paul, what's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you, Eric. Good to be here.
Yeah, man. I know we had some unfortunate circumstances. Everything okay? I know you was in an accident.
Everything is fine. I just got tagged in the rear end. Very minor accident, but it happened right in front of a police officer, and the guy that hit me was drunk.
Go figure.
So it turned into a bit of a stop for a little while, and it certainly put a ding in our plans tonight, but I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So speaking of drunk and getting hit, I thought it would be a great episode to talk about this Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing. You know, I've been seeing on the news lately that there's people talking about men can be victims of domestic violence. I've never heard such nonsense. Did you know that men could be victims of domestic violence, Paul?
The hell you say?
I mean, it blows my mind.
Well, if you listen to the first professional witness for Amber Heard's defense team, you would know that men can't be, well, gay men can be, apparently,
Okay.
this is according to Dawn Hughes, which was the expert witness for the Amber Heard team. Women can assault women, men can assault men, men can assault women. The only kind of domestic violence that cannot happen is women perpetrating violence on men. And she made that very clear in her testimony in the case.
Now, what do you think her reasoning behind that is?
Well, I mean, there's no money in male victims. It's the same reasoning behind feminist co-option of the domestic violence industry 50 years ago. It was their hot button issue. They could put out a battered, bruised woman or an image of one and tell the world this is what bad, evil men do, and people threw money at them. And that formula works very well. And if you have a guy like Johnny Depp or any of the other of millions of actual male victims of domestic violence by women, you would certainly disrupt that narrative and probably contribute to them shutting down.
So I've got some mixed feelings on this case. I mean, I am glad that it's finally starting to get some exposure, but this is something that people have been talking about for decades. Do you
Sure.
think it was just the right timing, or because it was a celebrity that was involved? I'm sure maybe it was a mixture of several different things coming together.
Well, I think it is a mixture of a lot of things. You know, Amber Heard's connection to the Me Too movement, and then the reality of this story. You know, what we're seeing here, it's ostensibly a defamation lawsuit that Johnny Depp has filed against Amber Heard. But I don't think he even cares about the outcome or the verdict of this. This is a man who wanted his story told, and who, fortunately for him, had the resources to get it told now in front of the whole world. They're starting to see inside this relationship that's typical of so many relationships. But it only happened because we had the right victim at the right time with the right amount of money and celebrity status to get this done. If Johnny Depp was Otis the bus driver, nobody would care. We would be talking about something else.
Yeah, and I thought maybe this would help it somewhat start to get better. But have you seen what happened to Fred Savage recently?
No.
So they was doing a reboot of the Wonder Years, and there was an accusation against him from years ago. So they just fired him from the show. So that,
Of course.
so that's not going to happen. I'm hoping eventually that something's going to get done about this. But in all your years of doing this, is this your first time of hearing somebody or hearing a woman laying a turd in the bed for the man?
Yep, I got to say that's a first. And I've seen and been aware of both men and women doing really crazy things during the process of a bad relationship while it's going south. All kinds of insanity. Leaving a turd on the bed, that's a new one. It's reaching a new height, and it's certainly driven the meme world out of its ever-loving mind in the past couple of weeks.
But let's be honest, I'm not really surprised. There's no telling how many times it's happened before, but these things really get crazy. And I'm glad, he had those recordings. Those recordings really seemed to vindicate Johnny and vindicate this movement. This is something he was mocked. He was taunted. You're a man. Nobody's going to believe you. What are some of your thoughts on the case? There's been lots of different elements that's been floating around right now, but that particular recording. What are some of the thoughts that you have on that?
I think this is the case of the century in terms of men's issues. I really do. It is the perfect storm in a lot of ways. As we just talked about, you've got the right victim and you've got the right perpetrator. She's, and I can't wait to see her under cross. That's going to be really entertaining. I bet there's 1 million people at least watching that live. But this case points out not only the reality of how abusive women can be, it also points to the problems of borderline personalities, which is a hush-hush topic. I mean, Amber Heard's defense team hired psychologists that would, because they would not diagnose her with borderline, which she's already been diagnosed with. It's a great case to get borderline personality out there and to get a discussion more about that. It's a case to talk about male victims, and it's a showcase of the deceit and dishonesty of the people who control the domestic violence industry. Dawn Hughes was a perfect example of it. She literally lied about the reality of domestic violence and talked only in stereotypes. And every once in a while, she accented everything by saying, oh, yes, of course, men can be victims, ha, ha, ha. And then she went on to describe every victim as a female, every perpetrator as a male, and all the perpetrator classes as either male or female on female violence. It's a showcase of just how bad things are, just what the problem is. And if we pay attention to it, it gives us a leg up on actually getting some stuff done.
Yeah.
Hopefully will open the door for other wealthy men who have gone through this to get their lives on public trial and to get their stories told. Because Johnny's killing it at this. He's winning.
Yeah, man. And I know his case wasn't family law, but there's another kind of transition into this when it comes to VAWA. Have you heard of Cains Law?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
So this is quite new. They have attached the funding with Cains Law to VAWA. There was a case where a father killed a child. And we see many times where this is on the other side, but they are taking this incident and now wanting to make it to where you can no longer claim parental alienation in family law cases. And not only that, they don't want you to have expert witnesses in these cases. And they attached from that one situation this to VAWA. VAWA is something I've been studying much more on, and I still got a lot more to learn. Could you tell everybody, Paul, kind of like the origins of VAWA and how it plays into situations like we're seeing with Johnny Depp?
Well, you can see the originator of VAWA in the Oval Office today, and make of that what you will about the man's competence or whatever. But Joe Biden is an old school politician that has built a career on blaming men for problems, persecuting them, figuring out ways to enable women to behave badly. And it's interesting. I mean, to me, it's impossible to talk about VAWA without talking about Joe Biden's childhood. This is the guy who originated this. And it turns out that his sister beat him unmercifully when he was a child. And the family rule is that you had to put up with it, that if you defended yourself, there would be a nuclear reaction from the family. And Joe Biden gave testimony before the Senate years ago saying, my sister abused me and I've got the bruises to prove it. And if it was a rule in my family that if you lifted a finger to defend yourself, that you would be crushed. And he believed that's the way things ought to run in the world. And so that informed his dedication to VAWA and to the type of law that it is that strictly genders domestic violence as a male problem, allocates tons of money for women. There's been some changes to make it appear gender neutral over the years and with different revisions of it. It's not a gender neutral legislation. It is all about spending money on ideologues to further their ideology. It's not even about helping female victims. It's never put a dent in the incidence of domestic violence.
Absolutely. And I'm going to get back to this Johnny Depp thing, but a lot of what we do in the community with fathers' rights is trying to get some legislation some shared parenting legislation, CPS reform, all the different rabbit holes that you can go down. But what good is that legislation going to do, Paul, if VAWA is not addressed?
Well, I'd rather reframe the question a little differently. Is as long as our family courts are a secretive, corrupt system, and they're corrupt beyond words. They are malicious in the way they operate. They intentionally inflict pain and harm people as a matter of routine so that lawyers can suck the money out of families that are dissolving at the most vulnerable point in their lives. They do it, as Stephen Baskerville put it, with ruthless efficiency, and they know exactly what they're doing. As long as we have that, I think the only sensible advice that you can give men is not to marry. I mean, I hate to say that, and I say
No, I
that.
understand it.
I say that fully aware that marriage and the family has been the backbone of our civilization, that whatever advancements we've made, it's focused around the nuclear family. And it's a tragedy. But family courts are too corrupt. You could get rid of VAWA and the family courts would still be a slaughterhouse. You could enact all kinds of shared parenting laws. And as long as there's an active bias against men in those courts and an active willingness in attorneys to siphon funds off of families as a part of their destruction, then that's the system we're going to have. I think it's hopelessly wrecked, Eric. I do. I don't think, I mean, I really appreciate all the people that lend a voice to these issues and that work for legislation for shared parenting acts. I laud them and respect them, but I don't think it's doing any good whatsoever.
You know, unfortunately, I have to agree with you. And that's not saying that we don't have hope and we don't want it to, guys. I mean, it's just dealing in reality. And, you know, Paul, it is an honor every time I get to come on here with you. You've got, you know, years of knowledge behind this. And I'm just curious, with this Johnny Depp situation right now being so hot, we've been talking about this for years. Most of the time they don't listen. Now people are starting to listen into it only because it's with this case. How could we, as, you know, a movement or advocates, use that to our advantage to really excel that message? Because we know how these cases go. I mean, Will Smith was just like, you know, a couple months ago, that one's kind of died down already. There is a lot of momentum with this, and I think we really need to dig our toes in and make sure we keep echoing what's going on.
I think we drive it in and beat it like a dead horse into the cultural narrative. It's like, move over, Karen. Well, here's Amber. A term like that can be coined. I think that invoking this case, the Depp Heard case, invoking Amber Heard's name, every time you hear somebody deny the reality of female abusiveness, it's an irrefutable point now that can be presented out there to anyone and can become a part of the dialogue. Now we don't have any excuses. I mean, this is really the first case of its kind in our history. All big profile cases have always been about abusive men or allegedly abusive men. Men that are, I mean, Mario Batali was just acquitted today of
Really?
sexual assault charges. And of course, his name will still be dirt for a long time because he was accused, but he did get off. He was found not guilty. I shouldn't say get off on it. He was found not guilty. There's a lot we can do in the dialogue to put this right back into people's faces, that this is the reality of many relationships. God, there's millions of Johnny Depps out there.
Yes.
There really are. And there's millions of Amber Heards out there. And one of the things we can do is to keep talking about it. But again, I go back to my default position. I would love to believe that there's political solutions. There's not. You know, what politician, even now, is going to stand up and we say we need to take a look at how unfairly men are being treated in family courts? That would be professional suicide for a politician. Nobody's going to get up and say that. I don't believe there are political answers unless they're far downstream of cultural changes. What we have to do now is seize this moment and use it to change the narrative that's out there. Everybody knows about this case now. And it's something that can be used, I think, like a bludgeon to make the point as many times as it's needed.
Have you seen that meme that said Amber Alert has a whole new meaning?
Nope.
It's a good one. I'll have to send it to you. But I'm with you. And this narrative is so deep. Anytime I speak a pro-father's message or some of the issues that men face, it becomes you are completely a woman hater, you're woman bashing, and it could be some of the most positive messages out there. And I'm shocked at how society reacts to it. Even a lot of men. I used to hate that word simp, and I understand its meaning 100% now. We have so many of those guys out there, and it just seems almost impossible sometimes to really push these issues. That's why I'm glad that case is going. I really am, and I hope it just continues to bring some stuff. I'm guessing, did you get to see Amber's witness on the stand?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. I thought it was a wonderful performance. I will give her very, very high marks. I really appreciated the redness in the face and the contorted facial expressions with no tears. I thought that was a real nice. And she had all the elements of crying except for saltwater, which means she's a great actress, I'm sure, in somebody's B movie. No, I thought she was way over the top with her performance. And there were moments where she was almost unlucid and shrieking, and not a single tear that I could see falling out of her eyes.
No. What do you think about that defense team?
Her defense team?
Yeah.
I think they're desperate.
I do too.
But I think they honestly know what's coming. In the coming days when she is under cross, too many times I saw Johnny Depp and members of his defense team smiling as Amber Heard was tearfully, or at least with fake crying, recounting all the time she was raped and beaten and savagely, and never ended up with any marks on her that anybody ever saw. But apparently she was beaten and raped many times by Johnny Depp. It was shameless. And I want to go back for a second, though, about the simps.
Yes, please do.
I followed a similar path. When I first got involved online in doing work on men's issues, I didn't like the word mangina very much. I didn't like simp. I didn't like a lot of these insults. And guess what? I think about the really only appropriate response to these guys is with shaming. It is shaming. There's such sappy, phony adulation of women, and it makes for dishonest men, dishonest, obsequious men. I mean, do you trust a pussy hound as a friend?
No.
Anybody, do you trust a guy that's obsequious with women and groveling to them all the time? That's the guy that'll throw you under the bus. The problem here is these are men of poor moral character. If they had backbone and if they had values, they wouldn't be on their knees all the time. They wouldn't be rushing to enable and rescue all the time. They would let women be grown-ups and adults, which they are, and to make their own case in life and make their own way. But these guys, I don't see them changing. And it's probably not the healthiest aspect of my life. But at this point, I take some minor pleasure in shaming them and moving on.
I understand that. I definitely do. Do you think it's just them trying to win over the attention and affection of other women when men shame other men?
Well, I think we live in a society that conditions all of this. We raise women to feel accountable, or not, excuse me, misspoke. We raise women to avoid accountability and to not have to be accountable for anything. And we raise men to shame and control each other into protecting that in women and enabling it further. I mean, how many times have you heard in life, even in the old school terms of, not disrespecting women, changing your language, get up when a woman walks in a room. That was the old school way of showing deference. And now is, believe all women is the new school way of showing deference to women. It's all the same thing. And we've been raised with it for thousands of years. It comes out of the romantic model, which is a gynocentric model of viewing relationships, which is all women centered. It's all about them. And gosh, do we get shocked that we wind up in a family court and it's all about her and she wins every time. That's the world we live in.
So this, happy wife, happy life, having to buy her the ring, open her door and everything. How do you think that's pretty much what you're talking about right now. But I mean, how do you think that has played into this over the years? It seems like it's always the responsibility of the man. That's what we've been told makes us a gentleman.
Yes, it is. But at the same time, I mean, what is it? Let's define gentleman, what that means. I know, for instance, when I hear anybody say happy wife, happy life, I'm listening to a guy with no balls. And in a more refined way of putting that, he's a guy with very few values. In other words, what he's saying is the only thing that matters is doing what she wants me to do so that she'll be happy. And it's a promise that I'm going to suffer if I don't. Because what if my wife is unhappy? What's my life going to be? We're talking about kowtowing to somebody so they won't abuse us. That's what happy life, happy wife, happy life really means. It means enabling an abuser and kissing their tail so that they won't be abusive and so that we won't pay a price for it. So anybody that subscribes to living that way, come on.
Absolutely. I don't know if you heard the recording, I guess, when Amber had threw the liquor bottle and sliced Johnny's finger, and they was talking about it, and she said, you always run from your problems. He's like, I went to the next room to get away from you. You sliced my finger. She said, how you expect us to get over our problems if you're just running? I mean, what's got to be going through the court's head when they're hearing stuff like this? Do you think any of that's really sinking in?
It's hard to say. You put I hate to use the word sympathetic, but let's be indulgent with Miss Heard for a moment and say that she's presenting a sympathetic figure. That goes a long way with human beings. If she has the image of really, regardless of what the facts of the case are, if the jury believes that she's a victim, that this brutish drunkard of a man has wronged her, they will forgive her of cutting his finger off. They'll forgive her of cutting his penis off. They've done it in juries before. So what the jury's going to end up doing with this in this current governance and culture that we live in right now, it's hard to say. But I do think so far, and I think hopefully it will even get better with Heard on Cross, is Depp has masterfully handled this, and his lawyers have handled this real well. I don't think she's a sympathetic figure. And I think all we need to help the cultural narrative is to see this woman get crushed by the jury. I hope they find for Johnny Depp for the whole $50 million and they toss her countersuit out. If that happens, it's a game changer, I believe, in terms of the possible outcomes for these trials in the future.
You're right. You brought up something that reminds me of something Melissa Isaac says all the time. She says, emotions win cases for women and lose cases for men. Now, do you think that is due to a system, they set it up that way, or is that the narrative that is played into that?
I think that's human beings. That's a human tendency, is that women win on emotions and men lose on them. And it makes it very hard for men to win on facts if they're going up against women's emotions. But I do think that in this case, that Heard's behavior is so egregious, so abusive, so crazy through this whole thing, and she lacks so much credibility. I think there's a good possibility that even with emotions on the side of a woman, I think there's a good chance the jury's going to turn on her. And I think one of the things that Depp did and his lawyers did very skillfully was to talk about his childhood and his relationship with his mother and how that set him up for abusive relationships. They're actually forcing the jury to look at the life of a man and actually care a little bit, which is an interesting change of events, but it seems to be happening, or at least I'm betting that it is.
There's other things, that's going on in this case, though. If it was any other man, I think it would start going in the other direction. I mean, he's admitted to the drinking, he's admitted to the cocaine. I think what was the saying? I donated my, man juice to the slippery whore. And as crazy as all of that sounds, it almost seems like because Johnny's telling the truth and he's not hiding from it, that he's winning favor.
Yep. And his statements, I mean, I see it differently as somebody who works with men and has been on the clinical side of what happens when men hook up with borderlines. It's amazing to me that he didn't hit her. It's amazing to me that he didn't put her through a wall. We've only heard the tip of the iceberg of just how much craziness he was living with on a day-to-day basis. And I think the jury, if you've got the right guy, if he's a likable guy, I think you've got a shot at the jury sympathizing with him over this woman. Because I think her testimony, her acting was so bad. She would burst into tears like on cue about every 3 to 4 minutes, and then come back and look sideways at the jury. I just don't think even with the bias against men and in favor of women, I don't think the jury's buying this. I think we're going to get some pleasant surprises out of this. At least I hope I'm right about that.
Big role in Aquaman, but there was no aqua coming out of that eyes. I was definitely watching that. What are some of the symptoms, Paul, for these men that have been in these abusive relationships and put up with somebody with BPD?
The best thing I can tell you is you catch this stuff early on. And the main reason men are so vulnerable to it is the same reason that Johnny Depp was vulnerable to it. Love bombing from an attractive, highly sexual woman is like kryptonite to men. It just is. And all of this goes back to this romanticized, unrealistic view of women and of relationships. But that kind of stuff tends to make men silly putty. So I think first things first, too much information. If you're on a first date with a woman and she's telling you about how she was sexually abused, run. Quickly, get out of there. If she's telling you in the first 10 minutes, what a bastard her ex-husband was, run. Stop it then. I don't care if she's good looking. But the problem is, to me, is men's too much willingness to go for this. This is a true story. I talked to a guy once that had been in a terrible relationship with a topless dancer. And go figure, she turned out to be a borderline and caused all kinds of problems in his life and nearly wrecked it. He had a terrible time, nearly killed himself from all the grief and anguish he was going through. And 6 months later, he was telling me about this other topless dancer that he met, but she was different than all the other topless dancers. It was like there was an absolute incapacity to learn from this. And I think that really is the biggest problem. I'd love to portray men as victims, but I don't see them as victims. We make choices. Right. We make choices to appease women, to placate them, to practice that happy wife, happy life stuff. When we do that, that's an invitation to a borderline. That is a wide open invitation to a borderline to come in and begin making a wreck of your life. And so we have to stop it there. Have you ever tried to talk a man who thought he was in love? When everybody else can see, hey, this woman is not, she ain't right here. Have you ever tried to talk to a guy about that?
I have. I've had some crazy ones, Paul, as I'm sure you have. I had one not long ago, spying on him, pulled a gun on him, the whole 9 yards. I'm getting away. Right back, goes right back, and I'm like, what are you doing?
I
But
did
it's
it.
like they just can't get away.
Yeah, it's sort of what we're wired to do. But I think conversing about that, talking about it openly. Um, One of the things I love, I'm going to pitch XY Crew. I hope we can get a link to them down here.
Yeah.
We're having 7 days a week. We're doing men's groups online, and you can find it at regardingmen.com. We've just changed the name and going through URL changes, but you can go to regardingmen.com and read all about it. One of the things I can say for all the guys that attend all these groups every day of the week, we don't have any of them doing that stuff. They come and talk about their lives, and we keep each other out of trouble.
Yeah. Do you see men open up more when they get in there with other people that have went through these situations?
I see men open up when they get into an environment that they won't be shamed for opening up. You know, one of the things that feminist ideologues for the past 50 years have done is talk about how men have their feelings repressed in childhood, and men need to learn how to articulate and express their feelings. And the moment they do, when it's something as a feminist doesn't want to hear, then they immediately tell them to shut up and to man up and to be quiet. Women do this frequently, talk about how men should express their feelings more. And then I've suggested, don't tell any guy. Next time you're on a date with a woman, you go to a movie, try crying during the movie for her and see what happens in the bedroom that night, which will be exactly nothing. Women say they want guys to express themselves, and then they reject them if they perceive them as weak.
But I thought masculinity was toxic.
Oh, of course it is.
A woman wants a masculine man.
Yes. And most women, I don't care what they say on Oprah, most women are attracted to stoic, strong men with a good sense of direction and not an overabundant amount of interest in the woman.
Right.
That's what women are attracted to, only we're not supposed to acknowledge that. If we took advice from feminists about how to handle emotions in men, there's not a man on the planet that would ever get laid.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. And you know, I think part of falling in love with somebody and getting in a relationship is connecting with them, telling them a little bit about yourself. But what are some of the dangers? There's nobody out here that hasn't made mistakes, that haven't had fears. But what are some of the dangers of expressing those dangers, those past mistakes to somebody that's got BPD?
Well, I think you've got to be careful about, expressing past regrets or dangers to anybody you're entering a relationship with. But BPDs especially, they are empathetic. And by saying that they're empathetic, I'm not saying they're sympathetic or that they're sensitive, that they're very calculated, but they read men perfectly well and they gather information. This thing told about, I had a girlfriend once when I was 18, and we both got drunk. We got in a fight, and I slapped her.
Yeah,
that'll come out, guys.
It will.
That'll come out. The moment you fall out of favor with that borderline, then she gets to take your wife beating story and spread it to anybody who will listen, and she will use it to wreck your life. But again, I want to say is that you don't have to worry about what you tell a borderline if you don't talk to one.
There you
go. And if you're seeing early on too much information, if you're another no non-starter, pink hair, bunch of tattoos, bunch of metal in her face.
Yeah. 100%, man. And, you know, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. We've got all the warning signs, you know, of people to keep your distance from. And I agree with you. One of the best ways of this is prevention. It's very dangerous to get married right now. I agree 100%. But what would be some signs of a healthy relationship, Paul, that might be a sign that it's okay to talk to this person? Let's flip it around for a second.
Well, I think you got to do something that most men are never taught to do, and that is to critique a woman based on what you know of her values. What are her values? What does she think is right and wrong? Where's her integrity? Positive signs is that she values respect and composure. Another positive sign is that she doesn't mind being female. You know, that there's I would argue most women these days have a problem being a woman. There's so many of them in competition trying to be men. So you can have a twofer on this, both identifying a negative and seeing a positive. If you've got a woman that wants to compete with you, if she's, to me, and you look, some people are not going to like this, I don't care. If she's overly ambitious, if she wants to be a CEO, she don't have time for you. And once you end your usefulness to her, she'll eject you. I think men should look for women, and lots of luck doing that. Look for women who understand the importance of submission in a relationship, the importance of masculine authority in a relationship, of male leadership. I know these are like dinosaur terms that a lot of people don't want to hear, a lot of people might scoff at today. They're the very values that make relationships healthy and functional and working and cooperative between men and women. Because, you know, there was a time when we used to sort of cooperate with each other. Women had their thing to do, men did their thing. Nobody had it great. There were downsides to both roles. There were upsides to both roles. But they worked. They tended to work, and marriages stayed together. Now you've got women that are like, well, I'll have a kid when I'm 38. Okay, well, fine. Go find somebody else to be a father.
Out of curiosity, I just got to ask you, why do you think so many American women specifically lack those values?
Because American men, have given them life beyond their wildest dreams in enabling. They can do anything. They can go to school, which I don't begrudge them. They can have careers, which I don't begrudge women. I wouldn't commit to a woman that was a quote unquote career woman, but they can have it all. Women can literally choose. I mean, Warren Farrell is famous for saying that women can work full-time or stay at home full-time, or they can work part-time and stay at home part-time. And what men can do is they can work full-time, they can work full-time, or they can work full-time. We don't have choices like women have them. Women have an embarrassment of riches. And by any standards you can possibly think of, women in Western culture just have it absolutely made. And people can't even criticize their behavior without being called misogynist. So they have all kinds of social protections. It's made them insufferable. And unfortunately, the Western male, or as you might say, Eric, the simp, absolutely has no problem with enabling that sort of entitlement. And so I think it's spoiled a lot of women.
Yeah, not to bring my personal life into it, but the reason I ask is, you know, I remarried, but my wife's Korean. Night and day difference.
I bet.
Night and day difference, Paul.
I bet.
I mean, she appreciates me being a man. Even the times where I'm like, hey, hold up, you know, and I kind of push back. She respects that. And it was just night and day difference. But I never experienced that with an American woman, ever.
And there's not very many American women that you can experience that. I mean, one of the things that I think we have to acknowledge, and again, look, I don't want to paint this as, women are the identified problem, because I think men are just as much of a problem as women do. I feel very strongly
100%.
about that.
Yep.
But the pool of available women in the West is tainted with too much garbage. I mean, as you know, I work counseling men, and one of the things that comes up over and over and over again with my clients is these are pretty successful guys, many of them, but they're out there on dating apps, and it's like they're in a sea of garbage. And they're talking to women who are physically 4s and 5s, and that are rejecting them because they don't make 500,000 a year. It's amazing what's going on out there. That's the pool that men have to work with. Another reason to, I think, view marriage skeptically. But I do think if you're careful, you can get burned going outside your culture too. It's not like that. I have a cousin that married a Filipino woman, and they're going great guns. It's wonderful. They're like 15 years strong now together. Wonderful relationship. But he was married to a Vietnamese woman before that dumped him and took all his money and did all kinds of terrible things. So it's not a guarantee, but I think your odds are a better shot with more traditional cultures.
Absolutely. I got a few comments down here for you, and I think this is an important one for us to touch on. Jim Douglas said, if you feel the system will never change, what should we do? Why should we fight? If it's a losing battle, how do we combat it?
It's a really good question, really thoughtful question. And the only answer I can give you is what I really think. And why should we fight? Fight what? I mean, fighting gynocentrism is like trying to fight snow in a blizzard. You don't win at that. And again, I don't have anything but respect for people that work on law, that are committed to activism, that do the thing. I think they're wonderful people. And at the very least, in their activism, even if they don't change the system, they get more people talking about these issues. And I think that's very important. The fight that I encourage people to have is with themselves. And especially for men, is, how much are we pinning on women? How much do we want them to fix us? How much do we need them? There are other things in life. And what's interesting is that for most men, they're going to be a lot more successful with women if they're dedicated to their own lives to begin with. And if they're all about taking care of themselves and self-improvement, that happens to help. But that's an internal battle that every man's got to do with himself. What should you fight? I don't think you should fight anything. I think you should live your best life. You should be eyes wide open about what is real in front of you. Gynocentrism, hypergamy, all these issues that we talk about, these things are very real. Your eyes should be wide open. You should measure how they're going to impact your life and in your personal decisions. And I think that's the only thing you can do. Because look, I got news for you. There ain't never going to be a men's rights parade in Washington, D.C. We're not going to have a victory day. Never going to happen. And gynocentrism being sort of like the blob in a way. You cut off one part and it pops up somewhere else. And it's like if you pass, and they have in some states, they pass shared parenting laws. And in those states, there are still droves of fathers trying to see their kids because passing the law just doesn't do it. You're up against something that I don't think is beatable except in your own personal sphere. You can win at that. You can't win at the big picture. At least I don't think so. Make of that what you will.
So you bring an interesting point. You talk about we're never going to have that big rally up in DC. I agree. I have been to several rallies. People, they call them million men marches and stuff. And Eric, will you show up? I get there and 15 or 20 people are there. And I'm like, guys, this does the opposite of what you're wanting it to do. You got to start trying something different. And it seems like people have done the same things over and over. I'm with you, though. I think the more we talk about it, warn other men what's going on and work on ourselves. I know as much as I can sit here and tell you about the crooked family law system and things that I went through, I was the one that got myself there. You know, that's a hard reality. That is a hard reality. But if we can take self-inventory of ourselves and warn other people, like, hey, man, you need to be watching out for this. This don't sound right. You know, I think us men can help other men more than anything.
Absolutely. And that is where it's at. That's what we do at XY Crew. That's how I see these conversations. Is, you know, there's never going to be a politician that'll take on the feminist lobby directly. It just can't happen because it's suicide. But you know what? You don't have to marry a borderline. And that, I mean, that's life-saving work. If we can reach guys and just teach them what to steer clear of and help them learn from their mistakes with women, we can save lives. And that is a battle worth fighting.
100%, man. Gaz Olson Nua said, why does it always have to be someone famous to go through something like this for people's eyes to open and understand men go through abuse too?
Well, I give the same answer. You know, in the news media, for a missing person, man, you really need to be a pretty blonde white girl. Because if you're a pretty blonde white girl, there'll be media converge on that. And you don't have to be anybody famous. You just be pretty blonde white girl that's missing or in trouble or something like that. And we'll get a national crusade going. The reason it has to be somebody famous is because nobody gives a damn about men. I mean, and Johnny Depp is doing this and he's succeeding way against the odds and in spite of the attitudes about this stuff. If the circumstances were just a hint different, he'd be being crucified right now throughout the media. And she would be played as the sacred Madonna who was offended by the drunken ne'er-do-well or wash up. The media would have taken Amber Heard's language and started using that against Johnny Depp. This is just gynocentrism 101, man. Nobody cares when it's just a guy. That's why we lose so many of them.
National Coalition for Men, Women Against False Accusations. But I think we can fight back. I think we can fight back against VAWA. Thoughts? The sexist bias law is destroying our men.
This question, honestly, with all respect, makes my case for me. How many people do you really think would vote in the Congress would vote to defund VAWA?
On both sides. I'm surprised the support that it's
I'm
got on both sides.
maybe Rand Paul would do it.
Really?
But, well, yeah. I mean, in the legacy of his father, he's another Dr. No on spending money. So I think he did vote against a reauthorization of it once. But the VAWA is going to be reauthorized with flying colors. There's not going to be any significant resistance to it at all. As a matter of fact, the last time there was resistance to it, the Republicans screwed it up. They were reauthorizing and they had changed part of the draft language to point out that homosexual men, gay men, could be victims of domestic violence too, and they wanted to allocate some funding for that. The Republicans, being the idiots that they are, decided that was the hill to die on. They didn't object to the gender bias running all the way through VAWA or the corruption or the misuse of funds in VAWA. No, none of that bothered them at all. It bothered them that they wanted to allocate money for gay men too. It was a dumb way to fight this thing. And of course, they lost it miserably. But no, there's no way that any politician in America, or very few of them, would ever stand up and say, I want to defund VAWA. It's just not going to happen. That would be their swan song politically.
Yeah. You know, and that's interesting. I go around and I talk to a lot of these politicians. One of the things about the Republicans is they're very hot on the fatherless issue, and talking about the issues that the children are facing without their dads and stuff. But at the same time, won't fight back at stuff like this. I don't get it.
Well,
I
they're
don't think they
happy to
realize
tell
it.
men they need to step up and pay their child support, and men need to step up and be fathers. Obama was just incessantly doing that while he was in office. It's, of course, one of Joe Biden's mantras. It is, again, we just keep running into a dead end with this.
Oh yeah, 100%. Half of the legislators are attorneys, guys. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, we're going to continue getting that message out, but
and I got to really lay it on the Republicans and allegedly conservative men. It was like Rick Scott, the former governor of Florida, while he was governor, vetoed lifetime. They were going to end lifetime alimony in Florida, and he vetoed it
twice.
Yeah,
twice. It's back on DeSantis's desk right now. It went through the House and it went through the Senate. So we'll see what happened, but he did it twice. I tried talking to him once about it. He wouldn't talk to me. I was in person, but that's a whole different thing. I think we're getting.
I bet he wouldn't talk to you.
No, we tried. We definitely
tried. If I was him, I wouldn't want to talk to you either.
Oh man, but I mean, we're gonna keep trying, Paul. I mean, but this Johnny Depp case, I'm glad that people are finally starting to talk about it. It only took a celebrity going through it for it to happen. But I think there's going to be some interesting stuff still to see on this. What are you kind of looking forward to seeing in this case?
Well, I'm looking forward to a new definition of herd immunity. Sorry, had to.
That's the new. I'm making a meme out of that.
I think we're going to see a legal crucifixion. I believe that they're going to go. Amber Heard has been set up perfectly to become destroyed. She's not a sympathetic fixture. The public has obviously turned against her. I think Depp's lawyers now feel like they have full license to go for the jugular, and I think they're going to. So it's going to be a very interesting week. I think we've actually got a shot at a judgment for Johnny Depp in this, because if his lawyers play this right, the jury may hate Heard so much by the end of the trial, they just don't care about anything except punishing her. And that obviously needs to happen. I think it's maybe a 35-40% chance we'll get a good ruling that way. But I think the most important part is that we're going to see a hugely public exposure of an abusive woman in a relationship. And there's not going to be any hiding from it. There's not going to be any rationalization available. People are just going to have to live with the fact that this is one of those cases. And it might make them think, well, if there's this one, maybe there's more.
Absolutely, man. That moment can't come quick enough. I think we've all been waiting for that to happen for a while. Before we get out of here, though, there's something I really want to stress to you guys. Tell everybody about Regarding Men, Paul, and what you're doing. I know you've already talked about the group that you got over there, but I think this is very important for a lot of you guys that's tuning in to participate in something like this. So I want you to plug that real quick.
Well, sure. Happy to. It's actually, we're calling it XY Crew, and you can go to xycrew.com and it'll take you to the website, or you can go to regardingmen.com. It'll also take you to the website, either one. But what we've done, Janice Fiamingo is participating with this, and a couple of other people. We have men's groups on Zoom 7 days a week. We also have a cyber shed that's open 24/7. It's come in very handy when guys are maybe in really bad straits, sometimes feeling suicidal, going through what men go through in this stuff. They reach out through that and they connect with our guys in the cyber shed, and then they can come into the groups. And we talk about family of origin stuff. We talk about people's marriages. We talk about the parental alienation that several of our members are experiencing. but we as a unit, a band of brothers, we hold together there, and these guys are chugging through it and doing fine. And as a matter of fact, we're planning a big event, a jamboree this coming fall here in the Roanoke area. We've rented a big house on Smith Mountain Lake, and we're bringing all the guys. It's a members only event. If you want to come to that, you got to join XY Crew. But by all means, show up. This October, we're going to have 5 days or 6 days and 5 nights of mountain biking, hikes, fishing, kayaking, everything you can possibly imagine in a really beautiful part of the country. And this is what we do. This is how I think we fight and win, is that we stick together, red pill guys, and we take care of each other.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I went out to California, I think it was back in October, and I got to meet Warren in person for the first time. First thing that he did, he took me out to the woods and took us like on a couple-mile hike. And we sat there and talked while we was hiking. And I didn't understand the importance of it until I was doing it. I was there, I was in mode, like promoting the issues and everything. It was just one of those getting in nature, disconnecting from it, and it works wonders. So I want to be
and I went for one of those walks with Warren, and about a half mile into it, my back went out.
He's pretty fast for an old man.
Oh, he can go. There's no doubt about it. Don't underestimate Warren.
No, I was shocked. He was smoking us young guys. But man,
I have no doubt.
It's such an experience I'll never forget. But yeah, guys, please go and check out that group. I mean, for anybody that listens to this with parental alienation, shared parenting, and I think we get so stuck in that sometimes. This goes much deeper. This is a big rabbit hole that has so many different areas. And I don't think you're looking into the red pill community enough, because it's what causes it. It really is. I mean, I've met a lot of these guys that aren't fathers, but they're still here. They're warning each other and just, talking back and forth. And there's some really good information, guys. So get in there, get involved. I think you will learn a lot. Paul, man, thank you so much.
And let me add one thing to that, if I could, Eric. For you guys out there that have going through parental alienation, abusive relationships, high conflict divorces, all that stuff. What you're used to so much all the time is that people wanting you to shut up. What I want you to hear is, we want to hear your story. We want to know what you're going through. We want you to know that you can connect to a bunch of other people who are going through similar stuff, who have been through it, have come out on the other side of it. You don't have to sit alone with these horrible things happening to you if you don't want to. You can join XY Crew for $5 a month. It gives you 7 days a week of online exposure to groups and to all kinds of one-on-one activities. And again, we're planning other stuff. Don't sit alone with these problems. If you're feeling like nobody gives a shit, nobody wants to listen, it's not true. We're here for you. Just wanted to throw that in.
That's it, man. I love it. Guys, please get out there. I'm going to have to join that myself, and I would like to come on that retreat.
Yeah, we would love to have you, man. Are you kidding?
Absolutely, man. Paul, dude, love you. We got to do this more often. It's been too long.
Anytime, Eric. Happy to do it.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in.